Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. My name is Davey. I'm one of your hosts, and thank you so much for joining me for this first episode of 2025. Happy New Year. I'm not sure if you're grateful that this is a new year and you're ready to kind of close a chapter that was 2024, or if this is a difficult season for you and you're maybe have some fear or trepidation around the future or what's to come for this year, or you've stepped into this new year feeling apprehensive or confused or foggy or aimless. I'm not really sure where you're at in this. I would venture to say that the reason you're listening to this podcast, though, is you are or you have experienced some kind of pain in your life. That is the common denominator of life. And what we want to do here at Nothing is Wasted Ministries is we want to meet you in your pain and provide a pathway through. That is our aim. That's what we wake up every single day hoping and praying for. It's our deep, holy discontent is when people feel like they're alone and they get stuck in the middle of their valley. You know, I've been through a few valleys in my life, but one really big one, 2015, when I lost my wife and our unborn baby in a home invasion. And I remember the feeling of despair and feeling alone. And then I also remember the different pivotal moments where God showed up, either through his own presence and his spirit, or through scripture, or in most cases through other people, through guides along the journey. And they gave me a clear pathway to walk that journey. And that is really what we have as we've stepped into building a ministry that provides resources, that provides pathways that I wish I had in my crisis in life. As we do that, that's what we want to do. We want to provide a straight pathway. I've been thinking a lot about the verse, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. Cohen, the other day, this was his memory verse from church, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And Christy followed it up. She was like, very good. And she quoted the entire verse. And he goes, no, it's just trust in the Lord with all your heart. And we were like, well, no, buddy, there's more to that, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your paths straight. And one of the things that I feel personally as we step into 2025, I always have a word for the year. And I feel like the word this year for our family, for the ministry, is the word established. And the reason I've been feeling that is because 1 Peter 5 says that though you suffer for a little while, the God of all grace, he himself will confirm, strengthen, he will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish. In that order, he will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish. And I think that process is the testimony of walking through a valley, that he restores, that he confirms, that he strengthens, and he establishes. And we feel like as a ministry that is the season that we're stepping into, is a season of establishment. You know, in the life cycle of organizations, you kind of start in a startup phase and you're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to get a sense of an identity and what are we called to do? We think we know what we're called to do, but we go after some things and things begin to develop or they begin to reveal themselves along the way. You know, as you walk in faith, God begins to reveal who you are in him and what you're called to do. And when we started this ministry back in 2019, all I was doing was traveling and speaking and coaching some people, and we had a podcast. And then things began to evolve and God began to reveal, this is what I'm calling Nothing is Wasted Ministries to do. And we now, 5 years into this, as we step into 2025, we're going, okay, we know that we're called to meet people in their pain and provide a pathway through. And pathways can be tricky. Pathways inherently, it has a connotation of being established. There's a pathway that's established. And for many of us, we feel like we are taking a machete and we're cutting through a jungle, trying to forge our way through this thicket, this overgrowth of confusion in the midst of what we're going through. And so that is our whole aim as a ministry, is to help clear that thicket, to provide a very clear, straight pathway as you're trusting in the Lord with all your heart and leaning not on your own understanding, so that he directs your paths. And we want to be kind of little G guides to point you to the big G guide that is Jesus. And so I love this imagery of pathways as we're stepping into this new year. We think about it a whole lot. How can we provide pathways for people? And along pathways, there are always guides or points along the journey where God has a unique and specific purpose for that season for you. And there's a particular season of resourcing that he wants to do in your life that's going to move you into the next phase of that pathway for you. And so this particular episode, what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring on some of those guides, some of the team members of Nothing is Wasted Ministries, and invite them to talk about some of the areas that they're most excited about for Nothing is Wasted Ministries, and some of the things that we're offering you as you're stepping into your pathway, some of the pathways that we're providing you. And so you're going to hear from Teresa Glantz, who's our coaching director, some of the exciting things that are happening with coaching moving into 2025, some of the things we've been doing in 2024 to really strengthen our coaching, the coaching arm of our ministry. You're going to hear from Amy about community, our community platform, Community Plus, some of the things that we're bringing to the table when it comes to Community Plus and that we're offering. You'll hear from our co-host Aubrey and her new book, What We Find in the Dark, and some exciting news along those lines. And then you'll hear from Ken Roberts, who used to be our coaching director and in fact established our coaching arm of our ministry, but now has transitioned to our local church development director. And we'll talk about the healing leader arm of our ministry, what that all looks like. And then we're going to talk to Catherine, who is our content director, where she produces the entire Nothing is Wasted podcast and all the content at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. So I'm excited to bring some of my friends on that are part of this team to share with you what they're excited about. And every single one of them, I asked them the same question: what was your favorite podcast episode in 2024? So it's cool to hear their own takes on what their favorite podcast episode is. But what we're wanting to do is we want to take a moment before we really just dive into the year, and we want to look back on all that God has done in 2024, and we want to look forward into what he's going to do. And, you know, with this word established, the other thing that continually the Lord is telling, he's kind of like showing me and revealing me, is that the Proverbs says, man plans his ways, but the Lord establishes his steps. And so we come into a new year like this, and we can set these agendas, and we can set these goals, and we can set these strategies. And at the end of the day, man will plan his ways. And that's good and right that we do that. But if we haven't invited the Holy Spirit to guide us and to lead us, not saying like, instead of saying like, hey, will you come on board, God, with the plans that I have, saying, God, I surrender my plans. And I want to walk in your ways and in your pathway, because that pathway is straight. And so would you establish my steps? Would you restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish my steps? And so even as we as a team plan our ways for 2025, we are opening our hands and saying, God, we don't want to go anywhere where you're not going. We don't want to get ahead of you. We don't want to lag behind you. We want to just walk in step with you. Would you establish our steps? And so it's exciting just to kind of hear from everybody as we're walking in unity and following the Good Shepherd as he's really establishing the steps in front of us. So that's it. That's where we're going this episode. I'm excited for you to tune into this. And so let's go ahead and jump into the first segment and the first part of this conversation. It's going to be a good one. Well, Teresa Glantz, our official new coaching director. It's so great to have you join me for this episode where we're looking back, looking forward. We're talking about some of the things that we have seen in 2024 and things that we're going to be seeing in 2025. And I really wanted to make sure that you come on to talk a little bit about especially the coaching arm of our ministry, because that has been something that has been evolving ever since. I mean, it's something that was a part of Nothing is Wasted Ministries from the very beginning, when Christy and I were the ones doing the coaching, and then brought on more certified coaches for Pain to Purpose, and now we're enhancing it even more with trauma certified coaching, and you have been pivotal and instrumental in that. And so I'd love to just step back for a second. I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. I know we've had full episodes about this, but can you give us just kind of flyover of why having a guide to walk through our pain and trauma is so important in the healing process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I was like many other people. And I think when we think about mental health in the church, we don't always lean into that. We get a little funny about it. And I thought if I personally did the things that God has asked me to do, I extended forgiveness, I did all of that, that I would just be all better. Everything would be gone and I would be better. And I learned that that wasn't the case. And so along my journey, finally got into therapy and coaching and began, as they kind of reflect back to me, the things that I'm saying or my beliefs and those kind of things, I started going, oh, I could see where this is off, right? Like maybe my thought process, maybe my beliefs weren't exactly in line, and I couldn't see that myself because I live with me every day. So I have my beliefs, and having somebody reflect that back to you can be really helpful and cause you to pause and go, oh, I might need to take a look at that.
Right.
So I think having someone partner with you is so important.
That's so good. We say, in fact, you can see it on our landing page for coaching, nothingiswasted.com, nothingiswasted.com/coaching. We say this: you can't repurpose what you don't process. You can't process what you don't own. You can't own what you won't name, and you can't name what you can't see.
So true.
And there are so many things that we just can't see for a lot of different reasons. I have my own way that I see the world just by my propensity, the way God wired me, right? He wired me a particular demeanor and a particular persuasion, right? And we all need those different perspectives, of course. But then I also have the ruptures that have taken place in my story that has caused some of that even to get more skewed. And I need someone else outside of me who's not in the thick of it, who's not emotionally wrapped up in it, going, hey, I love you, but here's where you're seeing it wrong.
That's right.
And it really helps to rewire those beliefs, which we all know beliefs are really what determine then our behavior and our
Right.
renewed perspective, right? As Romans 12:1-2 calls us to. Coaching and therapy, we've talked about this before, but I'd love for you to speak on it. Both of them, they're different. And it's sometimes can be difficult to know, do I need to go see a therapist? Do I need to go see a coach? Which one? What would you say? What's the difference between the two? And why would you advise someone to go see a therapist, or why would you advise someone alternatively to go see a coach instead?
Yeah, that's a
Or in
great
addition
question.
to, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Or in addition to, because all can be helpful. And I think the difference, I'll speak mainly from a coaching perspective, is that coaches are really peer to peer, right? So we are not authority over you, we are peer to peer. And the goal really is that we kind of lock arms with you and journey through your pain with you. We have some education maybe that the person coming in doesn't have, and we understand how your experiences have impacted you. So, one of the things I talk to coaches about when I'm doing training is, we're not forcing people, we're not telling people what to do, right? We're locking arms with them and we're helping them. We are not diagnosing people. Therapists would do that. Coaches do not do that. We don't suggest any kind of medication. We don't do that because that's really what a therapist would do. A coach would not. So for us to be able to lock arms with you and kind of journey with you through what you're going through, the beauty in Nothing is Wasted is that we try to pair you with someone who has a similar experience. And some of the things I talk to the coaches about is psychoeducation can be really helpful. So, for example, if you're getting triggered a lot, for me to give you the education around what actually happens in your brain when you're triggered, and why does your body respond the way it does when you're triggered? And just the psychoeducation can be so helpful for people to understand I'm actually not broken. You mean I'm functioning as I'm supposed to be? And that can be really helpful. So the difference really, coaching more peer to peer, we are not diagnosing you. We are not talking about your medication because that's really what a therapist would do. So they're very different. And there have been people who have come to me and said, I've been in therapy for years and the coaching seems to help more. For some people, that's very true. So, yeah.
And it is an interesting phenomenon where, we've heard that multiple times, and that's not to throw shade on therapy. I think it's
Not
an
at all.
important, essential part of your journey. I always advise people you should do both.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
work hand in hand so well. And so, but there are certain things that a coach can unlock that a therapist necessarily can't, and vice versa. And so that's why we've really decided to narrow our scope as a ministry and say, hey, we're going to develop coaches, certify coaches, offer coaching to the people that we're serving so that we can offer something that's distinct and unique from what other organizations are offering. And that's what I love about what we're doing with Nothing is Wasted and with the coaching arm of the ministry. We just had, Teresa, this, like literally in real time, just had someone come through and fill out an intake form for a coaching package. And this is what I'll leave everything confidential, but the one thing that this person said was the Pain to Purpose course has kind of brought me to realize I have a little more going on than what I've given myself credit for. Other things as well that I have a hard time writing out. And so this is even like case in point that you may step into doing the Pain to Purpose course or even just any event in life and realize, okay, there's more things I need to uncover here.
Yes.
Clearly, I'm not seeing some stuff here. And so that's why we're offering coaching as a ministry. Now, we've started to make some distinctions with coaching. It used to just be Pain to Purpose coaching. Now we've brought online trauma certified coaching. They're two different tracks. Can you explain a little bit about the difference between those two? And in your experience, like how would you advise one person to go one way versus the other way if they're trying to make that decision?
Yeah. So the Pain to Purpose coaching is you're following the Pain to Purpose curriculum with a coach. So these coaches have all been trained on the Pain to Purpose material. So they understand how it's laid out, what we're talking about with each topic, and they're going to walk with you through the curriculum. So it's more of a guided path. And I will say a lot of people will get into Pain to Purpose or some kind of education like that and begin to say, oh, I think I have some stuff coming up that I have never dealt with. And the beauty is it kind of shines the light on that, and God kind of reminds them, here's some spaces that need some attention. And so for the Pain to Purpose, what we've done is all of the coaches that are trained in Pain to Purpose are at least trauma informed. So we kind of brought them through some light trauma training. So they're all trauma informed. They have an understanding how trauma impacts you, but they're all educated and understand the curriculum. What we've also done is we brought over and we trained some coaches in the space of trauma. So this is a 10-week course, a deep dive into trauma, so they have a really good understanding of what trauma is. And now the people
Teresa,
that
just for clarity,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but when you say it's a 10-week course, you're talking about the course that you've taken these coaches through, the certification process.
Yes. Yes, sorry. Yes, thanks for clarifying that. Yes. So we took them through a 10-week course. They've done a deep dive in trauma, and we've certified them in trauma so that Nothing is Wasted can offer trauma coaching. Now, why would somebody pick that versus the Pain to Purpose? The trauma coaching, there's lots of different reasons why they might pick it. But one example would be they have a fresh trauma in their life. Something just happened that feels very heavy. And maybe the Pain to Purpose curriculum isn't necessarily what they need. They need someone to hold space for them during this season of their life. Maybe it's somebody who's had some really significant childhood trauma, chronic trauma, things like that, and they need some help with that. These coaches are all trained in trauma. They're trained in coaching as well. And we're not following a direct path in that. Of course, the goal is that we move you towards healing, but it's not guided like it would be in Pain to Purpose. So I think the beauty is we offer both of these, and they can be a beautiful place for both people. Somebody who just gets into it and starts taking the course and goes, oh, I think I have some trauma. Maybe someone can walk with me through the course. Or somebody who's got something a little heavier and they feel like I actually need to meet with a coach in particular around my trauma. So I think what a great opportunity that we offer that. I mean, I don't know any other ministry that would offer something like that. And it's so valuable to people when they're trying to work through their healing.
It's so valuable. One of the things, I have conversations with pastors all the time, and one of the questions they're asking, they're scratching their heads. They're going, okay, we've got so much pain in our church. We've got so many different types, varieties of pain. How do we minister to these people who are going through what they're going through? We feel ill-equipped. We feel overwhelmed by this. And so when I share with them, hey, there are not just the Pain to Purpose course, but there are coaches in our ministry that can walk with people one-on-one. And more than likely, we have a coach that has walked through the same or a similar pain point as the people you're ministering to right now. They're like, are you serious? Wait, wow. And you match them. It's like, it almost feels like the body ministering to the body, and we're just coming as a ministry adjacent alongside churches. But that extends beyond churches. It goes into individuals who maybe aren't a part of a church, a local church, or we don't have a presence there as a ministry. Like, it's, if you're under the sound of our voice right now, this is an opportunity that's available to you. And we've seen so many people who have even started down the track of Pain to Purpose, or they've completed the whole thing potentially with a coach, and they've gone, there's more that I've got to uncover. And that's where some of this trauma certification or the trauma certified coaching can really come in and help, because it was just kind of a need that we were seeing, and we're going, hey, let's meet this need. Teresa, you've done a phenomenal job of really building some of this out to meet this need. 2025, we've got some really exciting things that are coming up, and some exciting where we're really marrying a lot of the stuff that you have been doing and what Nothing is Wasted is doing. Talk a little bit about the BTCS course. Talk a little bit about Trauma Academy. What are some things that we are dreaming and things that we are implementing right now?
Yeah, there is so much good coming in 2025. I'm so excited about it. So, I was certified in trauma and fell in love with trauma in the space of Christianity. Like, it's just amazing. And so, especially walking with people and seeing what God does when we kind of lock arms and see them start to heal, what an amazing space to be in. And so, Davey, as you and I talked about how can we partner together, one of the things we've talked about is the Trauma Academy, actually building an academy underneath the ministry and helping people to actually get educated in trauma. And so one of the things that we're doing, I built out a course called the Biblical Trauma Care Specialist course. And this course gives people a deep dive into trauma so they can understand what trauma is, how it impacts our bodies, how it impacts our brain, all of it from a biblical perspective. So bringing in scripture, helping them understand, how do we see this through the lens of Christianity? Because honestly, in the space of trauma, it was one of the things I struggled with, is how do I bring that into my faith? And so doing that work and then partnering with Nothing is Wasted and us offering that course together, the last few cohorts, I mean, it is an amazing space to be. The feedback I get is so good, and I love this space. So that's been really exciting. And the people who that course is really good for is, maybe you've got a care pastor at your church who just is trying to help people and would like some more education around trauma. Great space for them. People in care groups, people who are facilitators for Nothing is Wasted. I mean, the list goes on and on. Maybe they're not even affiliated with us. They just want to know more about trauma. That course is a great place for them to start to really do a deep dive into trauma. Or maybe they actually are thinking about, I'd love to be a coach. I'd love to partner with Nothing is Wasted and be a coach. That course is the first course you would need to take for us to move you through so that you can then become a coach with the ministry, as well as you can go out and do some trauma coaching yourself. So
Right. Yeah, that's what I love about our coaches is it's not an exclusive with the ministry at all.
No.
We have coaches that are building their own coaching businesses, and they're going and doing coaching outside of the ministry, and we're matching them with people who are saying, hey, I need coaching. So it's a beautiful marrying of just meeting people's needs, walking them down a pathway, helping them as they're moving toward healing. And I'm so excited about this. You're right. The past two cohorts, 2024, you've had some incredible cohorts in the BCCS course. And the next time that you're going to be offering this through Nothing is Wasted Ministries now will be in April. So we'll begin to talk about this a lot more in February. So eyes up. If you are interested, by the way, in this course, go to nothingiswasted.com/BTCS. We'll make sure that we put the link here. And it'll just be a form that you can fill out. It'll put you on our email list for specifically the BTCS course. Again, this is one if you're going, hey, I'm a pastor, I'm a ministry leader, I'm a first responder, I'm a I'm a caregiver, whatever it is, but you've got people who are experiencing trauma in your life. You're wanting to know, how do I minister to them well? How do I become more trauma informed and educated to be able to minister to people really well? And this is the first step if you are wanting to become a trauma certified coach through Nothing is Wasted Ministries. So nothingiswasted.com/BTCS. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I was going to say too, this next cohort in April, we already have a pretty good wait list of people who are saying, I want in this course. And I've said, if you really think you want in it, let's get on the wait list so you can get early registration. And we've already got quite a few people on that list. So I love it because it's a passion of mine. I love Jesus and I love the world of trauma. So being able to bring those two together, it is amazing. I'm so excited about it.
That's awesome. Well, we have a lot coming down the pike that we're excited about, with beginning to build out a trauma academy, beginning to create some continuing education for coaches. I even love the trauma foundations class that you have, that we're talking about releasing and unveiling and putting that underneath the ecosystem of Nothing is Wasted as well. So there's so much to look forward to. And so if you are interested in coaching or becoming a coach, make sure you keep eyes up for this stuff. Teresa, the question I'm asking everybody as we talk about this episode, we finish this conversation, is what was your favorite podcast episode of 2024? Everyone wants to know. Inquiring minds want to know.
That's right. Well, it would be the episode with Kay Warren. Episode 352. Oh my word. That was a great podcast. I listened to that. Now, I have a similar story. I've walked through suicide. So part of that, she does such a great job. She talked about hope in a way that changed my perspective on hope. So good. It was a great episode.
Such a good episode, and such an important one, because that particular pain point can be, all of them create a lot of confusion in our life. It just creates so much confusion. It is so
and I love that we have coaches who've walked through suicide, because we can partner with people who've walked through that, who can say, I get that. It's a different kind of journey. So it was a great episode though. Loved it.
Wow. Well, Teresa, excited about 2025.
Me too.
And thanks so much for joining me and spending some time with us and sharing with our community.
Thanks for having me.
Well, everyone, it's here. You've been asking for it, and now it's officially here. The Nothing is Wasted sweatshirt, and just in time. I mean, the weather is starting to get a little bit chilly, and you're trying to figure out how to get cozy this fall and this winter. Well, now you can wrap yourself in the comfort of the message of all that we do here at Nothing is Wasted Ministries, and that is, nothing is wasted. God doesn't waste our pain. Now, we know it's not just a mantra or a catchphrase for those of us who have walked through the painful valleys of loss and grief, trauma and tragedy. It's a posture of our heart and a prayer. Lord, in this valley, will you not waste our pain? This is too great of pain to go through to be wasted. So this sweatshirt will not only offer you a reminder that God is at work in your story, but it'll also offer you a conversation starter with other people that you come in contact with, to where you can begin to share your own testimony of how God is showing up in your story and how God will show up in their story as well. I promise you, this is an incredible sweatshirt. Not to mention, it's extremely comfortable. It is high quality. It's a champion brand, and it comes in two different colors, black and this color that my wife fondly calls sand, which may not sound that appealing, but I promise you, it's a beautiful color. And so you can check all of that out at nothingiswasted.com/sweatshirt. Order one for yourself, order one for a friend. This is perfect in time for the holidays. Maybe a friend or family member of yours needs to be reminded that whatever they're facing, that nothing is wasted. So go ahead and pick up your sweatshirt at nothingiswasted.com/sweatshirt. We've got we have a limited quantity of these, so head over to nothingiswasted.com/sweatshirt today and order yours. Don't wait. nothingiswasted.com/sweatshirt. Amy, great to have you joining me as a part of this lineup of so many different team members and the areas that they're leading and directing and working in. And it's really cool to see what God is doing in our ministry. I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with you about especially our community, Community Plus, local church, Pain to Purpose, and the facilitators. Thanks for being with me.
Well, Davey, I'm excited to be here, specifically to talk about this topic, because this is what I do all the time here at Nothing is Wasted. So thanks for having me.
You're immersed in it. You're really helping to be a lot of the front face of when someone interacts and engages with Nothing is Wasted, they're usually getting engagement with you. And it's an incredible thing that you have not just the heart to do that, but you also have a really powerful story. You've been featured on the Nothing is Wasted podcast, and you've shared your story on that, and you're using that now to help other people in tremendous ways, in a variety of different ways. We often call you you're the utility player, or the what's the knife,
Swiss
the pocket
Army
knife.
knife.
It's like the Swiss blade army. Yeah, the Swiss Army knife. Yeah, you just kind of handle a lot of different stuff. I'd really love to talk a little bit first about why is healing in community so important? You know, people could try to go out this alone, they could be isolated, but why is it so important that we do it in community?
Well, I mean, just first of all, I think that pain can isolate just on its own. It feels like you're so different from someone else, or their story doesn't relate to your story. And I think that even for my own story, that one of the first huge leaps in my own healing journey was connecting to a couple other moms who had walked through child loss. And they were a visual representation of where I could go. They were 7-8 years ahead of me. I was in the throes. I was just a couple months in of losing our son Hudson. And I just felt like this is where I'm always going to be. So even just having a connection point with someone else to say, oh my goodness, I can survive this. There's a pathway forward. There's light in the end of this tunnel. There's a way out of the pit of despair. So you're linking arms with someone else. I know some of the language we say here at Nothing is Wasted, you're borrowing that person's faith. You're borrowing their hope. You're borrowing their kind of map out. And so that's why I would say it's so important. And I do think that it's going to take longer without that guide or that friend who can say, me too, and I have been there, and you don't have to stay here. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, it's so good. You know, and it's even if you have the ability and the opportunity to be able to lean with others who are walking a similar journey as you are, right? And you find that solidarity, you find that place of connection where you go, hey, oh my goodness, we say this a lot, right? Me too, now let's move through. In fact, I'm wearing my Refuge Widowers hat right now, and you guys all know, if you're listening to this, watching this, if you've been around Nothing is Wasted any matter of time, you know that we have a really deep partnership with Refuge Widowers. But this is just an example of what happens when a group of people get together who are walking through the same thing and refuse to let each other get stuck in the middle of that valley. Talk to me a little bit about that. Especially with community, what we're trying to do is connect people who are walking similar valleys together. Can you just share with me why that's so imperative, what that does for us in our journey, what maybe that did for you as you had people who would experience similar things in your own journey?
You know, Davey, one thing that I always say is that, you know, sometimes you feel like you have to explain yourself. And when you meet someone who has a very similar, and no one's going to have your exact story with the exact same scenario and timeline and all that, but someone who has enough of there's a commonality there, they speak the language of your heart. You almost don't have to explain where you've been. You don't have to find language for it and do the translation. And so to find someone else, whether it's being in your church or whatever, but hopefully here too at Nothing is Wasted, we're trying to build a situation to where you can connect with us, and there's someone here who can say, oh my gosh, I literally have been there, and now come with me. And so I think just finding someone who knows that language of your heart is so powerful. And even in our community, we don't have it all nailed down, but we are trying so hard to build a place where you can find your pain story and someone else can say, link arms with you. And so we have different groups you can join. We have our main discussion feed, but we also have different like side conversations, no matter whether you walk through betrayal or loss or there's just so many different groups, and hopefully we have one that fits your story as well. So we're building that, and we want you to join us because we know how powerful that connection point is.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, if you're not familiar with our community platform, nothingiswasted.com/community or community.nothingiswasted.com, what Amy's describing is an actual place online that is a part of our ecosystem where you can go and connect with other people who are going through similar things, the same thing you're going through, maybe not the same thing, but you can still derive encouragement, hope, and faith from those people who are interacting there and engaging there. And we're beefing some things up this year, which I'm really excited about. Not only do we have community, but we also have Community Plus, which is where you can give $20 a month or $200 a year. And I say give because it's actually a tax-deductible donation because we're a nonprofit. This $20 a month membership fee is actually a tax-deductible donation. And so you can do that to get all the additional content that we have behind our membership library, and that is all along with the community. But one of the things, Amy, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about one of the things we're doing in conjunction with our coaches. We're talking to Teresa on this podcast episode about coaching, in conjunction with our coaches to really enhance the experience there on community here in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, this is so exciting, Davey. Honestly, it's like I think I've been on the team now about 3 years, a little over 3 years, and we're seeing some of the fruit of what we've dreamed for and prayed for start to happen. And so it's so nice to have that for this coming year. Yeah, Community Plus houses our library. And if you don't know this, like that library is always growing. We are constantly adding a master class or some kind of content there. There's literally a curated pathway. You just fill out the form and we send you information for your pain story. And so there's just so many podcast episodes you've never heard because they're in the library there. There's so many special things in Community Plus that we don't want you to miss. And as you said, Davey, like the $20 a month, it's helping the whole ministry grow and be established. But with that kind of our like gift to you, I guess you would say, kind of the part of that partnership. Yeah. Are all these resources that our team is constantly creating, and our coaches are joining in with us to do those master classes. Teresa herself, our coaching director, will do some on how trauma affects your body, and like we just recently released one to help veterans. There's so many different topics that probably will hit either you or someone you love. And so our coaches, we've invited them to join us in a more kind of involved way to where they're going to be engaging in there, posting in there, higher access to very trained, biblically sound, trauma-informed, spiritually empowered leaders who have a story similar to yours. And I think, Davey, like, oh my goodness, years ago when I didn't know nothing is wasted, if I knew this, I would have been so excited to connect because this is exactly what I needed. Someone who was an expert in their field around trauma. They could explain why I was forgetting everything in my life because I was buried. My brain was a trauma brain. I didn't have the language for that back then. So to connect with other coaches who they're there, the access is there by being part of the Nothing is Wasted Community Plus membership. So we're excited to expand what we're offering there in terms of content and connection.
Yeah. That's so good. It's exciting what is happening. You're right. We've been really trying to think through, pray through, tinker with community for a long time. It's one of those areas that can feel difficult to try to help people connect online. And yet at the same time, it's so important because 1 Peter 5 tells us, let us not forget that saints all over the world are suffering in the same way that we are. And so we now live in an era where the power of technology allows us to connect with people who are suffering in the same way that we are. Like no other era in history have we been able to have this opportunity. And so we just want to play our part in doing that. And that's why we're so excited about community. One more thing, Amy, you work a lot with our facilitators at a local church level and really establishing community with them, empowering them, equipping them so that they can feel really competent and equipped as they're walking other people through pain to purpose there at local churches. It's one of the biggest things you do in working with our local churches. Talk to me about that and how is that? Why is that such an important part of what we do as a ministry, and why you're so passionate about that?
Yeah, so I think that's another shift over the last couple of years, Davey, is that we have just had this deep passion for people to not stay stuck. And so you develop the Pain to Purpose course, and we've just like, how many hands can we get it in? And we had an epiphany as a team a couple of years ago of like, we need to help church leaders. If church leaders and ministry leaders, nonprofit leaders, if they themselves are healthy, it's going to trickle down to their whole like sphere of influence and the people that they're like kind of responsible for. So even like as a mom, if I'm healthy and I'm walking with the Lord and I'm seeking healing, it's going to affect my family. And so one thing that I get to work alongside Ken Roberts, which was such an honor, as that he's the church development director, and part of my role is I work with our facilitators, and what that means is that person has said, yes, I want to help bring Pain to Purpose to my church, and I'm going to lead this small group time where, again, Ken and I meet with those folks, prepare them, and then they watch the videos that you put together, and then they have their handbooks the guidebooks that they walk through with their groups. And it's so neat. We are building very much a community within a community with our facilitators. It was so cool. Not that long ago, Ken and I hosted a facilitator kind of best practices Zoom call, and we had people literally all over the country on the call to just talk through, like, let's learn from each other, like what's going well. And so it's such a cool thing that we're getting to do, because we are building this kind of community we all know the course. We all have our own stories that we're trusting God with. And I'll just want to mention too, is like, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, my church isn't hosting Pain to Purpose, and I can do it myself, but I'd really love to do it in community. There's a couple ways you can go about that. You can, schedule a call with Ken or myself to talk through what does that mean to bring Pain to Purpose to your church, or you can have one of your pastors meet with us. But that's what we do. We love to bring Pain to Purpose to as many community spaces as we can, because we know that it's a proven pathway towards hope and healing. And we've seen it over and over and over again. And we get to see that on this side, and we want that for you. And so, yeah, we would love to connect if you are interested in leading it in a small group or leading it at your church. We would be happy to have that call, because we care so much about your healing and those in your kind of in your community and church congregation.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening to this, you're watching this, and that's something that you want to do, you're going, I'd love to have Pain to Purpose. I'd be in my church, be offered there. I'd love to be one that helps to spearhead that. Go to nothingiswasted.com/churches. Nothingiswasted.com/churches. We'll put it right here in the show notes as well. And just click on the button at the top. It says schedule a discovery call. Schedule a discovery call. And you'll schedule a call with either Ken or Amy, someone on our team there, who will be able to help you begin to put together a plan on how to launch Pain to Purpose at your church. It's one of our greatest joys to see people really step into, on the other side of the table, as they've walked through their own valley, as they've experienced healing in that, to now go, okay, how can I serve other people and be a guide for other people on their journey? Amy, it's awesome to have you here. Last thing I'm asking everybody who's been a part of these segments is, what was your favorite podcast episode of 2024?
Davey, it's impossible, right? It's the impossible task. They're all so good. Catherine is phenomenal at bringing in so many voices that every time, even though it's not my story, it will hit me, But I did pick someone who has a similar story, and that's Granger Smith. I think it's episode 325 is what I had already sort of followed his story and was thrilled when he was coming on the podcast. And just the piece of it that I love so much, he was talking about the slideshow. And if any of us have got, you've had any trauma, the slideshow plays, and just how he cried out to the Lord, and God and Jesus really did come and rescue him from that slideshow that we all have walk through at times when we've gone through pain and trauma. So that's my favorite one, is Granger Smith's episode 325.
True. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Amy, for being here and hanging out with us for a little bit, sharing your heart, sharing some vision around what's going on in 2025, especially in the area of community and churches, local church facilitators. It's so amazing what you guys do and what you do, and thank you for being a part of this. It's been awesome.
I love it, Davey. Appreciate you.
Well, now joining me for a segment of this really good looking back, looking forward podcast episode starting out the year 2025 is your other host of the Nothing is Wasted podcast, Aubrey Sampson.
Hello. It's very strange not to be hosting this episode. I'm glad to be here as a little segment guest, Davey. Thanks for having me.
I know. Well, it's been so good so far. It's been really good to just kind of like see what different areas of our organization, of our ministry, what we're excited about in 2025. You have something really exciting coming up in 2025. I don't know. I mean, you've published a lot of different books, right? There's been a lot.
Yeah.
Are you on some level, like, where would this rank in your excitement level for this one? I just feel like you've been immersed in this one for a while. So it just seems to me from the outside looking in, talk to me about how you're feeling about What We Find in the Dark. By the way, incredible title. It's releasing this year.
I do have I'm sorry. I know we're going to have some YouTube footage, so I got to get my book cover out here. Hold on. My publisher just sent me this giant What We Find in the Dark.
It's so good.
Last Hope Against Presence and Grief. Yeah, Davey, I've been living this book, Spiritual Darkness, Dark Night of the Soul, and for like 2 years, longer than 2 years, like 2.5 years, and then writing it and then editing it, and now it comes out in April. And so I'm very ready for it to come out. I feel like it is, some books are head books, some books are heart books, some books are soul books, and this is all three. And I mean that because God did a work in me, in my grief. And I wouldn't recommend most people write while they're in the process of fresh grief, but I did. And I think because I had wrestled with God through, seasons of lament and other losses, through the work we do here at Nothing is Wasted, I think in one sense, God positioned me to be able to write while I was in the middle of the fresh grief. But I will say, so I'm very excited for it to come out. I think it's going to bring a lot of healing to people who are wrestling through seasons of grief and those big theological questions around who is God, where is God when we can't sense him. And also I'm just ready for the thing to come out and like, let's go, let's be done now. You know what I mean?
Right. That's typically how it is. Like I found that this year when you release a book, someone told me that, like by the time you get to the point of releasing it, you're like, I'm over it. I just want it to be out.
Like, and I'm already moving on to my next book proposal. So you're just sort of like, you've moved on a little bit.
As part of the timeline, most people are receiving it from you very fresh and very new. And you've been immersed in it for so long that it's just it's kind of like when you tell your kids, like, hey, you feel like you have to tell your kids 10 times before they're getting it the first time. And you're just like, I'm just over, and that's a little bit of the phenomenon that happens. But I know that this is also going to be a very beautiful season as you release it, because of course, anytime you step into a release, God does even new things in your heart.
Yeah, that's right.
And stretches you and grows you in new ways.
That's
and
right.
You've got people who are going to be receiving this thing that you're birthing. Just to touch on that a little bit, there are massive theological questions that come when we go through grief. It really disorients us. I'd love for you to share with us a little bit how you feel like this project is going to help readers and listeners of. Okay, I guess I'll reveal it. We are a spin-off podcast, What We Find in the Dark podcast, for 8 episodes, right?
Yes, 8 episodes. I'm so excited.
Where you're going to be interviewing people specifically around this topic, and it's an incredible. So, first of all, before we dive into what that looks like, what are you hoping that readers and listeners begin to unravel and untangle in terms of the theological questions that this Dark Night of the Soul often presents? Like, what is your aim for them?
It's a great question. I think some of it is simply normalizing Dark Nights of the Soul. And Dark Night of the Soul specifically, we use it wrong. We tend to use it as sort of just like a time that's hard or heavy. But a Dark Night of the Soul, like historically, was first written about in the 1600s and is a very specific experience of God's absence. So now, we know, we've even said this on the podcast, we know the truth. God never leaves us nor forsakes us. God is not absent, but for some reason, God tends to pull back a felt sense of his presence. And that's an experience of the Dark Night of the Soul. And it's not that... it's something God does. I mean, I don't even know how to explain this. Once you start seeing it in scripture, once you start seeing it in life, you start seeing it in scripture and vice versa. But part of what God is doing in the Dark Night of the Soul is identifying the places where we're looking to anything else but God to find comfort, especially in our pain. And so God kind of removes that sense of his presence, because then you're like, I don't know what to hold on to, and you realize all the things you hold on to that are false gods. So God is doing powerful formation and freedom actually in it, but it can be deeply, deeply painful, especially in seasons like mine where I was already grieving, and so I wanted God's comfort, and I felt like I wasn't hearing from God, I wasn't sensing God. I know that's a little bit subjective, but I think most believers know what that means when we know, why can't I hear from God? Why isn't God showing up? Why don't I sense the Holy Spirit with me? So all that to say, you asked what I hope the book and the podcast kind of do and answer questions it answers. The first thing is just to normalize that experience. That is a normal part of the believer's life. And it does not mean you're going backwards. It does not mean you are spiritually immature. It does not even necessarily mean you're sinning, although sometimes in dark nights, God points out sin and idolatry, like I just talked about. But it is a normal part of our spiritual formation. And if we can stay faithful, keep showing up, keep asking God, where are you? Keep worshiping, keep trusting, keep reading scripture, keep being in Christian community. In the midst of that, we find on the other end that God ends up doing things beyond our wildest imagination. And we find that our union with him and our intimacy with the Spirit is greater than what we had on the other side. Right. So that's what I'm hoping to sort of normalize. And that somehow in the dark, like, we do find God's presence, even when God's presence feels so far away. And so I'm really excited. Excited to share the book because it was born out of a lot of heartache and wrestling, but it does move readers to a place of hope. But I'm excited about the conversations with some of the podcast guests. I've got some of my good friends, Chris Kane.
Yes, please tell us. Okay, hold on. I interrupted you. Chris Kane.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Chris Kane, Faith Yuri Cho, Steve Carter, Glenn Packiam, Tara Beth Leach. I've got this long list of friends who have, they're thought leaders, they're theologians, they're pastors. They've walked through dark nights, but also they've thought about the theological questions. Where is God? Who is God? What is God doing? Who am I? What does it mean for my ministry, my leadership in the midst of it? And so I'm looking forward to sharing those conversations because they've been encouraging to my faith, and I know they'll be encouraging to the listener who's hurting as well.
Wow. Amazing. It's going to be incredible to walk in this season and to see, for you to lead us into the season. It's going to be a really special time, and I'm excited about our community being able to have a window into these conversations, because that's where the deep wrestling takes place, is often in the dark night of the soul, when there's darkness, when it doesn't feel like God is there, and yet you're grappling and you're wrestling. And so it'll be cool to even experience you with another guest wrestling through some of these theological questions that you each respectively wrestled with God in when there was a felt absence. And so I'm excited about this. Okay, looking forward. We just did that. Looking forward to 2025. You got some exciting things that are happening right now.
Yep.
Looking back, though, Aubrey, I'd love to hear what your favorite episode. This is really hard when you're a host.
It's so hard.
What's your favorite episode of? We've talked to Catherine about this too, and as the podcast producer, it's like, how do you choose what your favorite episode is? I'm curious. How do you choose what your favorite episode is? Not to discredit any of the other guests, not to rank them lower, but what was your
and we have to pick one, right? That's that's the assignment, isn't it?
That's the assignment.
Because there are so many memorable ones, and it's very hard not to mention all the memorable ones. But the one that popped into mind right away is Alicia Britt Choli. I loved my conversation with her, and part of it might be just it's sort of on brand. She writes about spiritual disillusionment, spiritual doubt, spiritual darkness, and she. You know how some people just say what is so without couching it in sort of weird spiritual language that you're kind of like, oh, okay, I know what you're doing. She just says what is so with wisdom and biblical grounding and a love for Jesus. She has gravitas. It's earned. And that her conversation was very meaningful for me. I can remember getting choked up when I was listening to her, and talk. And it's one for the books of 2024 for sure.
True, man. Well, we will make sure that we put a link there for Alicia Britt Choli's. Aubrey, thank you for joining me on this segment.
Thank you so much for having me. You're a great host, Davey. You should consider doing this.
You know what? I've been told that I should consider this. Maybe it's in the cards for my
You've
future.
Got potential. I see it.
Thank you. I just keep looking at that cover behind you, and it's just so gorgeous. I'm so glad. When you sent that to me, I was like, yes, this embodies everything that this book and this podcast is supposed to embody. So, Aubrey, thanks for stepping into it faithfully. I know it's not been easy to wrestle with this one down, and thanks for joining me on this segment of this particular Looking Back and Looking Forward episode. Hi, friends. Just want to interrupt this conversation to see if you're looking for a way to help a friend who is hurting. You having a hard time knowing how to show up and show that you care in whatever pain they're walking through right now. Listen, we understand, and we've been there. Even though I've walked through my own trauma and painful season, I can still struggle to know how to best enter into the pain of those around me. I'll never forget the first funeral that I preached after losing my late wife Amanda in 2015. I showed up and I felt like I was stumbling through, not knowing what to say, because it just is so difficult to know exactly how to enter into somebody else's pain. In fact, there were so many people who were well-meaning right after my late wife passed away that they would send me all kinds of different things, but most of those things, they either filled my house with clutter or I ended up disposing of them because it just wasn't useful. As well-meaning and well-intentioned as people were, they just, I don't think, knew what to send me. You know, you want to find that perfect combination of meaningful and thoughtful and practical. And that's why we've created the Nothing is Wasted Restore Box. Nothing is Wasted Restore Box is just what you've been looking for as you seek to show support and love for a friend, a coworker, or a family member who is hurting. The Restore Box is a thoughtfully curated gift box that has some of our favorite resources and reminders from Nothing is Wasted Ministries that will encourage anyone who is walking through a difficult time. Whether it be loss, a divorce, a lost job, an unexpected diagnosis, betrayal, or just a season of depression or anxiety, or really any other pain point for that matter. This box is for when someone you love needs a reminder of hope and that nothing is wasted in their pain. Each Restore Box includes a copy of the Nothing is Wasted book, a copy of the Pain to Purpose devotional, a beautifully crafted scripture pack full of encouraging verses, the Nothing is Wasted anvil paperweight, and a Nothing is Wasted wristband. Now, we know it's hard to step into someone's pain, but we also know the cost of not stepping in is far greater. You can show you care and offer hope at the same time by sending your friend the Restore Box. Just head to nothingiswasted.com/RestoreBox. That's Restore Box, RESTOR box. So leave off that second E and give a meaningful gift to someone in your life who is hurting. You can follow the link in the show notes if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, or right below this YouTube video if you're watching it on YouTube, nothingiswasted.com/RestoreBox, and give the gift of hope and healing to that person in your life who's going through a difficult time. nothingiswasted.com/RestoreBox. Ken Roberts, great to have you back on the Nothing is Wasted podcast multiple times.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
For those of you guys who are watching and listening, Ken Roberts was featured episode 29 of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We brought him as a part of this featured episode right here where we're talking about reflecting back on 2024. We're looking forward to 2025. And man, we have been through quite a lot of changes, a lot of iterations where it feels like we're stepping into 2.0 of Nothing is Wasted together. Ken, it's been really incredible to have you as a part of the team. And one of the things, as you have transitioned into over the past couple of years, out of coaching director into local church development director, you're helping churches launch Pain to Purpose. We've come to realize some things, and we've come to realize that people have been having to go outside of the church in order to find their healing. You know, we had a coach that said that to us one time, and it was like, just hit us hard. Like, wow, you had to go outside the church to find your healing. And that's something that put a holy discontent inside of us. And we're wanting to bring those conversations back into the church. And that's what you're specializing in to help from the leadership to the lay people. Let's talk a little bit about the shift that we've begun to, because we've observed Pain to Purpose being launched in churches culturally. What are we trying to help churches with? And what are the things that we've been having to really ratchet down in order to do that?
Yeah, 2024 has been a great year for us. Looking forward to 2025. Yeah, Davey, kind of how we stumbled into it, you and I would say almost 2 years ago, after we started the Pain to Purpose, course for churches, and a lot of churches started coming online and using that. We began to realize that there needed to be more of a holistic thought or understanding behind it. That it was great to use the course. Our course helps a lot of people. It helps a lot of churches. But what we found is just an add-on, kind of maybe a course on the side, or just kind of added to a department. It helped, but it wasn't the total approach. And what we began to realize, and also as you traveled a lot and had a lot of conversations with leaders, is that we as leaders, have our own pain story and our own journey. Sometimes it's the built up of disappointment and leading in life. Sometimes it's trauma and tragedy in our own life that we're carrying. We're carrying our pain as we're trying to help other people's pain. And so we begin to realize, really, I think on two fronts, we kind of started experimenting with some things. One is how we could help leaders, point leaders, and their teams and their ongoing health and growth and healing. So that was one area we looked at. And then how can we also help them to build I would say a full orb culture with a healthy, healing, spiritual community. So that's kind of was our trigger point in our heads where we moved from just offering the course to moving more to really trying to connect with pastors and Christian leaders in their own life, but also in the context in which they led.
Yeah.
So that's really what we've been doing for the last 18 months, and I think we've stumbled into some things that have been helpful. And so 2025, we've done some of those things, and 2024, we've done some of those things. And 2025, we feel like we're going to be able to now more name them, order them, and move into them in a very strategic, in an intentional way. So that's kind of what the transition has been from 24 to 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things we've realized is that, like you said, when I travel and speak and we're sharing at churches, oftentimes you're on the road with me. We'll go on a Saturday night or a Sunday after services, and we'll sit down with the pastor, and sometimes the pastor's spouse, and we just start drawing them out, having conversations. And then for whatever reason, because of the work that we're doing in pain, and because we have we are having this kind of conversation, they'll often disclose to us some of the pain that they're going through personally, and their feeling of overwhelm of helping their congregation with the different varieties of pain that's going on in their congregation. So that really tipped us off to go, man, we've got to help holistically, from the top down, bottom up, and everything in between.
So I think the way to think about it is, the iteration of nothing is wasted over the years has been initially, to help individuals, to meet them in their pain and help them to find a way through it. And then it's kind of moved to our community and our coaching area. So we've been able to add more as we walk with them. Then again, a couple of years ago, we started offering the church license, because a lot of nonprofits and churches started coming to you and saying, how can we use this in our care system, as a church? And I would say how we're thinking it now is a, further iteration, maybe a full orbed approach as a ministry to specifically helping church leaders and churches.
Yeah.
So it's not in lieu of the other, but it's you might say in addition to.
Right.
And that's what I'm, kind of leading that charge, and honored to do it, humbled to do it. Again, a little bit of background, I pastored for 33 years. So I've been on that side of the desk for a long time. So I know what it's like to lead and to try to stay healthy in the middle of it. And I also know what it's like, to lead a spiritual community and all the pain stories that comes at you as a shepherd and as a leader.
Yeah.
So really, as we're moving to 2025, we're moving toward, a church arm, a church leader's arm, which we're kind of using the byline or the way to think about it as the Healing Leader Initiative. And we get that obviously from, Henry Nouwen, the wounded leader idea,
Wounded healer. Yeah.
healing leader idea. But here's our little byline we've been using. And then I have several initiatives that we're doing with it. And it's that healthy leaders build healing communities, and the two go together. So that's really the two objectives of our church arm. Helping leaders and their teams in their own healing and their own health and their own growth in all different dimensions, but also helping them with build a culture and provide them resources and tools to build a healthy healing community. So that's the whole idea behind the church development department. And really the 4 or 5 things that we've been doing or that we're initiating, for 2025 would be the healing leader roundtables. And we've been doing those, and we have, we're hoping for 4 to 5 in 2025. This is where you and I go into a city. They're using an anchor church there, an anchor voice there, and they gather other leaders from the region. And you and I have kind of a 9 to 3:30, time with them, talking about, you do a session on why the topic of healing in the local church is so important in the day that we live, with the brokenness and the trauma and the tragedy, the increase of pain that's all around us. And then also I do a session regarding our own journey of health, the healing leader's journey. So it's really a time to share with leaders why this healing thing that we think is so important in the day we live. Matter of fact, you and I would say, and we don't say this, we say this boldly, is that we think healthy leaders and a healthy team in building a skilled and safe place for healing in your community, spiritual community, maybe one of the most missional things you can do today as a local church. I mean, that's how big we think this thing is. Right. So we've been doing the healing leader roundtables. We've seen phenomenal responses in the cities that we've gone to, and we're going to 4 or 5 more in 2025. That's one of the first things. We're also launching what we call the Healing Leader e-newsletter. We have several leaders that have connected with us, given us their information and want to stay connected with what we do. But up to this point, we've been, had a lot of other things we've been doing that we've never really created a way to have ongoing communication. Right. So in 2025, we're launching a Healing Leader newsletter. And I think the byline would be something like, it's really for inspiration and ideas, helping, again, healthy leaders build healthy healing communities. It's just a way to continue to keep that conversation going, provide ideas, provide resources, provide inspirations. So that's the second thing that we'll be doing. The third thing that we will be doing is we're working on some really healing leader resources. We have some stuff, we have a lot of content, but we've really never put it all together and presented it as a way for leaders to be able to have resources for themselves and, again, for those they serve in those areas. And then actually down the road, we don't know the timing on this, so it may not be 2025, but we've been thinking about it for quite some time, is actually the potential of doing a Healing Leader podcast, which would be just for this. So those are some areas, that we are looking forward. I'm really excited about. I really carry this in my own life to help leaders, really live well, lead well, finish well, and to help them be able to, to build healthy healing communities as well. So pretty excited about 2025. Lots to do. 2024 has been very, very rewarding and fulfilling, but that's our focus as we move forward.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see. And it's exciting to see the transformational effect that happens when a church begins to put their eyes on this and go, okay, how do we create environments where people can heal? Biblically centered, spirit-filled, trauma-informed. It's the three-legged stool that we talk about quite a bit. And man, we've been around long enough to see some of the downstream effect of what happens when a church really does this, and the healing that takes place, the transformation, and the mission, right? The outreach that happens in local church communities as they're beginning to do this. We have people who are like, oh man, when we launch Pain to Purpose, it's a great space to invite people who are not a part of our church to come and find healing. And it's just been an incredible thing to be a part of. Ken, it's been awesome to have you a part of it as well. And we've got a lot of stuff to look forward in 2025. The Healing Leader Roundtable, one of the ones I'm excited about the most is in March. We're having one here in Indianapolis, which is the first time we've had one right here in my home base, which is going to be awesome. We've got a lot of different friendships, relationships around here that I think are going to be a part of that. So, and then if you are interested, I'm going to just throw this out there. If you're like, hey, I'd love for you guys to come to my city, partner with our church, we would love to help you with that. Actually, there's a landing page you can go to if you're a pastor, ministry leader, or if you're a layperson who's going, I'd love to figure out how I could partner up with you guys in this. I love what I'm hearing in terms of what you guys are doing to walk adjacent to local churches as we're meeting people in their pain, providing them a pathway through it. Go to nothingiswasted.com/wecanhelp. Nothingiswasted.com/wecanhelp. And you can schedule a call with Ken. You can get on one of those calls and begin to ask and probe some of those questions. How can Nothing is Wasted come alongside you as you're maybe bringing this to your pastor, or you're bringing this to your local church congregation? Anything else you'd say, Ken, before we dive into the quintessential question I'm asking everybody?
Yeah, the only other thing I thought about, I kind of left out, is part of the initiative is we also have healthy leader coaching.
Oh yes. How in the world do we leave this one out?
I was going to have all these other subsets, and what we found, again, we have Pain to Purpose coaching and trauma recovery coaching, which is for individuals,
right?
But we have moved, the last year or so into helping leaders specifically, especially if they feel like they're stuck, they want to finish well. They may be in what we call the caution zone. They know they're in rough water. That's what we call the caution zone. The crisis zone is, again, they've out of the raft in level 5, rapids, as you and I both were in our own story. We were actually launched into crisis or in a place of convergence. And convergence is when a leader is kind of bring all the threads of their story together and figure out that next sweet spot. And so we do specific coaching for all leaders, pastors and church leaders, called the Healthy Leader Coaching. And it's a whole arm that I lead and that I've been doing with a lot of leaders. So that's also something that I forgot that's part of our Healthy Leader and Healing Leader initiative.
Yeah. Amazing. All right, Ken, favorite podcast episode of 2024? curious about this one.
I went into our podcast for 2024. All the episodes, there's so many of them. I mean, I was just like, wow, 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 wow. But I had to land on one. So as with what I do, one that I really liked, there was a couple that I highlighted, but I'll just give you one. I love the Nothing is Wasted book one on More to the Story with Dr. John Walker.
Dr. John Walker.
And the reason I loved it is because it was your story, but I was there in the book with you as you read it, in his office, but also then interviewing him and just realizing how much he'd been part of it. And the wisdom and the insights that he brought was phenomenal. I don't know if it was in the interview or the book. I know it was in the book. It may have been the interview. But one thing that's been a paradigm shift for me personally was what he said to you. We're often looking for seasons, in life that doesn't have any pain, any white water in it. And his paradigm shift. And when I go to teach, sometimes I teach it to the churches for us. And I will usually read this portion from your book where he talks about, that's not the approach. You'll never get there. You'll always have frustration. There'll always be disappointment. But he said, if we will learn to live well in a difficult world.
That's right.
And that just turns things upside down. So I love that. I love that podcast.
Yeah.
And how that God used him in this significant season in your own journey.
Well, interestingly enough, here's a little bit of an aside, but I'm reading right now The Intentional Father by oh my goodness, John Tyson, pastor in New York.
Yep.
And he borrows this from Richard Rohr. But he says there's 5 major things that he is trying to instill in his son. And the first one, I won't go through all 5 of them. You have to go pick up his book or read Richard Rohr. The first one is life is hard.
Yep.
And it's very akin to what you're talking about right there.
Yep.
Don't try to make life easy. So he talks about the paradigm shift of helping your son. And this is for all of our kids, for all of us. It's not just, but I'm just thinking about father to son, helping my son realize, don't try to make life easy, but live well. Recognize life is hard, but I can live well in a difficult world. So
phenomenal. So that was my favorite for
Walkerism.
2024.
Love it.
I'm looking forward to 2025. A lot in front of us.
Me too.
Yep.
Well, thanks, Ken. Thanks for being with us on this segment.
Right. Later.
Catherine, great to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. This is exciting because those of you guys who are watching this, you're listening to this, Catherine Fitzgerald is the mastermind behind not just the Nothing is Wasted podcast, but all content, Nothing is Wasted. And we are like going behind the curtain right now. It's like the Wizard of Oz, where it's like we're pulling the curtain back, and we're I think this is the first time, right, Catherine, that you've been actually on the podcast
for an extended period of time. Yes.
For an extended period of time. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. At some point, Catherine's going to be sharing her story. At some point on the podcast.
Day. Yeah. It's not my favorite side of the camera to be on. So I like to be behind the scenes, but
you do such a great job with crafting and curating the content for Nothing is Wasted. So I wanted to talk about that when it comes to 2024, looking back on it in this episode. As we move into 2025, what are the things we're looking forward to? So looking back, Catherine, what are the things that you reflect back on in 2024 as you're thinking, man, Lord, look at all that you've done at Nothing is Wasted Ministries and the part that you've been able to play in that. What are you thinking about?
I think the biggest thing has been the launch of the Nothing is Wasted book. I think that was such a huge team effort and just an important part for our ministry of just putting the story behind what we do and why we do it. And I think it just was so helpful to other people as they started to read your story and Amanda's story to just see themselves in that story of pain and loss and where God has met them in it. And so I think it was such an important thing we had to do as a ministry to just come together and put that into the world. But I just, I think it's been really exciting to see how it's connected to people and how they're starting to connect the dots in their own story of what God's doing and where he's shown up. So,
yeah. It's been amazing to hear, not just, I say feedback, that sounds so trite, to hear people's testimony of how it's impacted them. We get messages through email, through Instagram, through social media, through when I go and speak somewhere and people are like, oh my gosh, I read the book and it helped me tremendously. And it's just so touching and affirming to know, okay, it was a long time waiting and this is exactly the right time that it needed to happen. And so it's encouragement to all of you guys who you're trusting the Lord's timing in your life for something that it feels like it's been suspended for a long time, that God has the right time in mind, his perfect plan. What are some other things, Catherine, as you're looking back on 2024, and what are some things that you're like, man, this was really cool, excited about?
Well, I think that, I can't remember if this was 2024, but we've kind of relaunched it in 2024, but the When Everything Changes mini course. I think that was such a huge, important kind of missing piece of our puzzle. We have Pain to Purpose course, and that's such a great course for people who have kind of walked through their pain story a little bit and are a little past that initial shock of loss, of grief, of trauma. But that we didn't really have that piece of content for those who had just stepped into it, and just even knowing how to get out of bed each day and work through what's happening internally and externally. So I think that was a really important thing that we created and that we launched into the world.
Yeah, it's really, and we're going to be featuring it again in 2025 to make sure that everybody's aware that this is part of the pathway. Our mission statement is we want to help you. We want to meet you in your pain and provide a pathway through. And so this is part of creating a pathway. And that's what I love about this component that we didn't have previously, where it was, okay, Pain to Purpose is great for when you kind of feel like you got your legs back under you. But what happens in the immediate? What happens in the life just got upended and everything just changed. And I don't know what to do. I can't see through the fog. And that's what this mini course does, is it provides that bridge between where the one day that everything seems to be fine, and then all of a sudden everything changes. And before you can really step into Pain to Purpose, this is a perfect mini course for you to be a part of. What about that we released several master classes, especially the back end of 2024. Yeah. Talk about those a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's some that were very near and dear to me. I'm a military wife, a veteran wife. So I was really excited about having a resource for military families, veterans, with the Healing for Veterans masterclass with Fernando Arroyo. So I think that was an important piece of content that we created, because we really hadn't had a ton of, besides a few podcast episodes, of things for military members and their families. So that was huge. I think the Sprinkles, they're always doing such a great job with that conversation around, sexual betrayal in marriage, and how do we heal from that, and what does restoring trust look like in that. And so, their masterclass is so, so good and so helpful for so many people. I know Misty Snyder's Parenting a Child with a Disability. I think there are so many challenges for parents in general, but then, you add on additional layers of pain and difficulty with diagnoses and all those sorts of things. So her content was just so, so helpful and so practical for parents. And then Natalie Runyon's masterclass on healing from church hurt. I think that one is just such an important conversation right now, as people are just getting very disillusioned in churches and very hurt, and they're walking away in large numbers. And the question is, how do we stay? How do we stay in the model that God gave us, which is the bride of Christ? And how do we heal from the pain that people cause? And how do we separate that from who God is? And so I think that masterclass is so helpful to so many. So excited about that one too.
Yeah, those are so good. The master classes, to be able to hear from someone, excuse me, who is like immersed in that particular topic, and they can speak from a place of authority on that topic. And we'll talk about this in another segment of this episode, but we're going to be doing a lot more master classes this year in a little bit of a different format, which I'm really excited about, where we're involving our coaches within that. But talk to me a little bit, Catherine, about some of the exciting content that is coming this new year and what we're looking forward to.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of just really helpful tools and resources coming out for individuals, for small groups, all that sort of thing. We've got the Nothing is Wasted video series and study guide. And it's really cool, because it's kind of this book club meets, small group curriculum meets Bible study, all wrapped in one. And, I think we have these really big, important conversations around pain and around healing. And sometimes it's hard to even initiate those conversations with the people in our lives, whether it's, coworkers or just our small group at church. And I think this is like a really great entry point into that, because it's kind of framed through the lens of your story. But I think it's just going to help people see their own story in it and see like where is God inviting me into deeper and more healing. And so I think that's going to be such a huge tool and resource just for everyday people, as well as churches. Churches might want to add this into their kind of pathway to Pain to Purpose. Like this can be a great first step to get people in that conversation and start talking about these things.
What I love about this particular project right here is it basically takes, obviously Nothing Is Wasted, the book is more memoir style. Mm-hmm. So it's not didactic, it's not preachy, it's not like a Bible study kind of book. Right. But what this is doing now is this is deep diving into, all right, book club meets Bible study. We're actually drawing on, okay, here we can dive deeper into some of the scripture that is baked into the story and is also baked into your story. So how do we really dig into what scripture is saying about these things, about these themes and concepts, these motifs that we see in our stories? I'm so excited about this. It's amazing what you've put together, Catherine, as you've been diving in with us on this. And this is going to be a really cool resource for people.
It really is.
All right. What else? What other great resources?
We have Aubrey's new podcast coming out, which she's going to share more about. So I think that's going to be just a great conversation into some of these deep dive theological questions that can come after loss and grief and trauma and pain. We have master classes, which, I know Teresa's going to be talking about some of the things we've been doing, just inviting some of our coaches in to having these conversations and to teaching us out of their expertise. So those are really exciting. Just continued growth and stories on the podcast. I'm always saying this is my new favorite episode, but I do think my new favorite episode's coming out this year in a couple weeks. So really excited about, we have Tyler Staton coming on, and that was just, I think, one of the most tender, profound conversations we've ever had on the podcast. So I just am really excited about some of the guests we have coming on. And then we're developing, like we have this development happening with the Pain to Purpose Kids course, which I think is a huge, huge need in the body of Christ and in this conversation around pain and healing. We get the question all the time, well, how do we help our kids? How do we help our kids walk through whatever it is, whether it's a divorce or a loss or a diagnosis, and that is the big question. Like as we as adults are kind of stepping in and trying to heal and walk through these really tough things, our kids are being impacted and affected by it. So just starting that conversation of or that development of this resource is going to be huge and a huge undertaking.
This is what I'm so excited about because we get this question all the time. Do you have anything for kids? Or they ask, is the Pain to Purpose course appropriate for kids and teenagers? And that's some tricky waters, right? There's obviously a whole spectrum of maturity that, so it's hard to answer that as a blanket statement. We do have a lot of teenagers that go through Pain to Purpose, but as far as kids, there's nothing that right now we've created or anything that we really see out there that is like an actual pathway for kids and has parent prompts where the parent can walk with them through this, the same concepts of Pain to Purpose, but how do we put it into a child appropriate level and help them to have the tools to be able to have that solid foundation, right? House built on the rock as they're dealing with what they've experienced already, the ruptures in their own life and their own story, and the ones they're going to experience. I mean, Catherine, in each of our stories, wouldn't you have loved to have the tools that Pain to Purpose offers before you stepped into your tragedy, before you stepped into that painful season?
Absolutely. And I do think there's just, when healing has to happen at a family level, because it's pain doesn't just affect one person in a family system or even in our churches, we can help adults, but if we don't have something to help kids, then some of this stuff gets carried into adulthood. And so I'm just really excited to just start that process. We know it's going to be an intense one, but we know it's going to be such a needed and helpful one for our audience and just for countless churches that will hopefully implement it into their DNA of what they offer their families. So
Man, can you imagine as churches are offering Pain to Purpose, they have down the hallway Pain to Purpose for kids going on. Now you solve a bunch of different, problems that Pain to Purpose sometimes can present. It's like, well, I don't know if I can't get childcare to go to the thing, right? It's like, well, here it is right here. We've got an actual program that your kids are walking through as well. And it's in the same pathway that you're walking. I mean, it's just an incredible. So this is a big development for us. I mean, there's a lot that we're trying to figure out when it comes to this, making sure that we bring experts in, especially child psychology and all of that stuff, bringing those experts to the table, and how can we do this in a way that's going to be excellent for kids, but also that's going to be clinical, and that's going to be really helpful. And so I would just say this, if this is something you're passionate about, you're listening to this, you're watching this, and you're like, man, I'm passionate about this, consider partnering with us financially, because this is one of the things that we're going after. It's going to be a little bit of a longer runway for us to develop all of this as we bring the team to the table and figure out how to do this. But we're really excited about what this potentially could offer healing for families. So, okay. Question I'm asking everybody: what was your favorite podcast episode? Oh, this is hard to ask the podcast producer.
I know you can't ask me this. You're not going to get just one.
Of 2024. What was it?
Well, I was looking back. I'm like, man, we had some really good guests this year. It was so good. My number one would probably be John Mark Comer, because I'm such a huge fan of his work, and just how he's helped me navigate my own faith journey. And he talked about dark night of the soul, which is something I've experienced. So that was such a huge and powerful conversation. I think we've had a lot of great doctors on. I was looking back at some, a lot of professionals this year. Dr. Amen, we've had Dr. Kurt Thompson on for a second time, and I just love his work. Dr. Chinwe Williams, which was a great episode if parents are kind of dealing with anxiety or depression with kids and just struggling to know how to walk through it. Dr. Alicia Cholet, and she talks about spiritual disillusionment, which was really powerful. Great episode. And then there's just some like smaller ones, that not all connected as experts, but Toni Collier's episode, I think her story, she was in the middle of her grief and her loss, and she's a leader, and I think that is powerful to hear leaders talking about walking through pain in real time, because I think sometimes we get the final, kind of sanitized version after the fact. But just to hear leaders kind of wrestling through their own pain and their own story in real time is so helpful. And then, Kay Warren, I think she's just an incredible voice and just so wise in how she's walked through her own grief and how she's walked alongside so many families. But there's just so many. I mean, Craig Cooper was kind of a surprise one that I really enjoyed, because he talks about just like friendship and helping people in hard seasons. And, he is friends with Walker Hayes, a well-known country singer, and just walking with him through alcohol addiction and that sort of thing. And I just think there were some just sweet things to think about as we neighbor well and we love people well in their pain. So just so many. It's too hard to choose.
I know. I knew it was going to be impossible for you to narrow down. We kind of joke around. Catherine asks me all the time, like, who would be your dream guest, Davey, to bring on? And I'm like, well, probably Elizabeth Elliot or C.S. Lewis or Billy Graham and she's like, can't do that for you. Sorry.
We've gotten close. We've gotten a couple degrees of separation on.
You know what would be really funny is if we did an AI thing or something.
Oh gosh.
That would be really bizarre.
That would be.
I actually have had that thought. I can't.
No, Davey, I'm going to say no to that one.
Catherine, so good to have you join us. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. People have no idea the investment that you make into this and really how it is. And I mean, you are the mastermind behind the content that we're producing. You're the one that's always pushing for different types of content, us bringing this to the table. So thank you for everything that you do for the ministry, for the people who are watching this, listening to this in our community. So
it's a gift. Thanks.
Well, that was an incredible episode. I'm so excited to have been able to be a part of that and share that with you guys. We've got so much to look forward to in 2025. And want to invite you that if you are passionate about this, if you're going, hey, how can I come alongside of you? Would you consider partnering with us financially as we're continuing to meet people in their pain and provide a pathway through it? You've heard some of the exciting things that are going on and the vision that we have to help people and to come alongside churches and the work that we're doing every single day. I'd love for you to be a part of that. And I'd also love if you are like, hey, I want to take a first step or a next step in my own healing journey. I would love for you to join me on our 5 steps to taking back your story Zoom call, live Zoom call. It's coming up. You do it about once a month. Register for that at nothingiswasted.com/start here, nothingiswasted.com/start here. And guys, I'm just really believing for you and believing for us as a ministry that there's just new levels of healing that is going to be happening, that God's taking us deeper, and that he is really rooting us and establishing us into the sons and daughters that he has called us to be, that we are no longer operating as slaves. We're no longer operating in the strongholds that the enemy would have us get stuck in, that we're no longer operating in our old man or old woman mentality, but that we're renewing our mind, that there is, as psychology would say, post-traumatic growth, that there is so much growth and healing and strength and purpose that is going to be coming out of this year for you. I'm believing it. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to walk beside you and play a part in the whole thing with you. And so thanks for tuning in to this episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for everything you do. Thanks for letting us be around for another year. Since 2017, we've been doing this for a long time. And we're so grateful to you. We wouldn't do this if it wasn't for you guys tuning in, listening, watching this, and being such an incredible community, sharing it with your friends, talking to other people about these amazing stories that we have on the podcast. So I'm just grateful for you from the bottom of my heart. I'm grateful for you and grateful to be a part of the healing journey that God has you on. I'm so humbled by it. I love hearing your feedback. I love hearing your story. So reach out to me on Instagram at Davey Blackburn. You can reach out to us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. And we'd love to just hear from you. Let me do this. Let me pray for you as you step into this new season in 2025. And let's start out the year with going to God and asking his favor and his blessing on your life. So Heavenly Father, I just ask right now that everybody who's under the sound of my voice, who's watching this, who's listening to this, that they would experience you in a fresh and new way. That they would step into your presence, because in your presence there is the fullness of joy, pleasures forevermore. In your presence there is healing. In your presence there is freedom. And I know that you're calling people out of some strongholds, out of some habits, out of some sin, out of some brokenness, out of some lies that the enemy is trying to keep them paralyzed with. Whatever it is, God, that they're feeling stuck in, whatever they're feeling stuck because of, Lord, I just pray that in the name of Jesus, by the blood of Jesus, you would break them free. This year would be a marking year, that this year would be a banner year for them. This would be a year where you establish their feet, where they experience restoration, where they experience confirmation, where they experience healing and wholeness, where they experience strengthening from your spirit, and where they experience establishment. We want to follow after you, Jesus. We don't want to take things into our own direction and our own agenda this year. So we surrender to you. And we know that there may be some painful moments this year, but even in the pain, we know that you're not going to waste it, that you're using this, you're leveraging this in our life for our good, to chisel away the things that would not be good for us to hang on to, pruning back the areas of growth or decay even in our life so that we can experience new fruit. I pray for my brother and sister right now as they're looking forward to the year ahead. Would they just experience your presence afresh and anew right now in this moment? Would you wrap them up in your arms? Would you declare to them that you love them, you're proud of them, you're for them, you've got great plans for them, that they are your son, that they are your daughter, and that you will never leave them or forsake them, no matter how in the dark they feel right now, no matter how confused they feel, that you have a pathway for them. And in that pathway, you've got glorious, glorious destiny, beautiful healing and freedom for them. Give them the strength to walk that pathway, to follow you every single day. We give this to you, Jesus. We ask this in your holy and precious name. Amen.